In 1998, the City College Fund received an anonymous gift of $2 million from a member of the class of 1955 to establish the K.D. Irani Visiting Professorship in Philosophy at the college. It was the second largest individual gift ever received from an alumnus. This is the kind of impact Professor Irani has had on his students, as well as others like myself. Let us continue with the discussion of domains of belief. Now, let's go back to the mythic era. We had the mythic era, then we had ethics and science, actually technology evolving first, then we had ethics coming out of branching out, and then science branched out, and so we're left with the fourth domain, which is religion. Is religion the remnants of myth?
Historically it is, but it is by itself an intrinsic domain of belief. It is the set of beliefs which gives significance to our existence. And most of us belong to traditional religions and therefore accept the visions provided by the great founders of various religions, and these are very profound visions. But there is no reason why we cannot reform these visions to make them more acceptable in our daily lives.
Reform or reform? Or are they one and the same thing?
No, I think reform, to reformulate. The trouble here is this. By the way, this distinction of domains came to me, and I insisted upon it because of the damage it causes when one doesn't realize that one is using the criteria of one domain for another. The standard 19th century, early 20th century materialist would say to the religious person, look, your scripture says this, 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 this. These facts are false.
Therefore your scripture is false.
That's right. God said in the book of Genesis that the world was made in 6 days, that the sun was created on the third day. Well, how could there be the first 2 days if there was no sun?
Yes.
And people have said this. Now, for someone to say, look, I take these to be factual propositions which need to be factually established, would be to apply the criteria of the methodology of science to religion. The composers of the book of Genesis were not interested in 6 days and this happened on the first day. They wrote it because that gives a kind of a nice rounded effect. Their whole point is, look, view creation or view reality as the creation of a creator. Take that stance, and then you will have an appropriate religious justification.
And what is that? That we are also the creators of our own reality?
That we, first of all, that we accept that we are creatures of a greater reality, and that we can then accept responsibility for the creations which we create and act appropriately.
Just as the Creator accepts responsibility for us.
That's right. That's right. And so I discussed this once in a course in philosophy of religion. And I said, look, you get these diverse positions. A materialist would say, this is false. I have scientific proof that the world was not created in 6 days. It took billions of years for these enormous galactic creations, etc., to throw up this, and then for the solar system to arise. That's the accurate one. This is the inaccurate one. This is false. The religious person would say, traditional religious person, this is the word of God. It cannot possibly be doubted. Therefore, this is true. And if your thing doesn't agree with it, that's your business.
Which is what they told Galileo.
Which is what they told, and which some of the people do today in the theory of evolution. God created these things in 6 days. You were saying that it took millennia for these creatures to turn up. This is Darwin's supposition. We'll say maybe it's a useful supposition for your research. You want to do that, call it hypothesis, but this is the true theory. Now, I've told the creationists, I knew one man who was brought up that way, that you're making a mistake. You're treating a religious vision as if it were a scientific theory. And he was not convinced at all. Both these views are views where you use the methodology of one domain in another. This is so common, and this is such a widespread philosophic disease that I use this distinction as a kind of prophylactic therapy to clean out this kind of trouble. I had a student in a course in philosophy of religion where I had made this suggestion many years ago. So he said, "You mean that God did not create the world in 6 days?" I said, "No, I don't mean that. What I'm saying is that it is unimportant whether he created it in 6 days or 17 days. The important thing is the religious message which underlies this."
Which is the creation
Exactly,
itself.
exactly, which is the relation of creator to creatures and so on. So he said, "No, if this is false, then I'm not bound by anything in the Bible." And I said, "You're not bound. You make an act of commitment to it." "Well, if this is false, then why can I not murder? Why can I not bear false witness?"
And that is why you call them domains of belief.
That's right.
Because we choose to believe
That's
this.
right. These are the beliefs that we have. And in religion, we have to choose them. I was really so taken aback by the intellectual pathos of this student. And this student viewed me as a danger in teaching philosophy of religion. Actually, he wrote a letter and went to see the president of the college saying that Iranis shouldn't be permitted to teach this course.
Because you're undermining religion?
Because he's undermining faith. The president knew me well. One day he called me in and said, says, "I'm not bothered, but that's what this man did." And I explained to him the whole thing. And he said, "No, I don't need an explanation from you. I'm confident," and so on. But this is so deep. And I want people to become clear. I think this is one of the major functions of philosophy. Unfortunately, the teachers of science and the teachers of religion themselves are imperialistic. And they claim that their beliefs cover everything, and that's the danger.
And the domains have no way of intermeshing into each other.
If we can, this is the task for the future.
To bring them together.
Well, we can't combine them, but we can arrange things in such a way that there is no conflict.
And are there areas of commonality?
There will be overlaps here and there, yes, there will be, particularly in technology, which will have overlaps. Even religion, religious ritual is frequently viewed as technology. In the old days it was, we have no rain, well, let's have this prayer for rain.
So it was a technique to apply which would end in bringing rain.
Right.
The end of that process was rain.
That's right. And to end the drought which the lack of rain had caused.
Isn't that what people do a lot of times in prayers? I pray for
this, I pray for
health,
that, for
wealth,
my health,
for winning the lottery.
Exactly. And in that case then, they have extended religion into technology.
Or they've turned religion actually to become nothing more than technology?
I hope there's something more than that. But when they do that, then it should be judged by technology. You have to judge, does it work or not? And if it doesn't work, then we would say it's just bad technology.
Prayer is bad technology. What an interesting concept.
If it doesn't work, if it
Yes.
doesn't.
And if it does?
If it does, then it's successful technology. And then we would try to look for how it is that it's happening.
So those proponents of, again, using William James's definition, mind cure or thought cure movements, basically, they've found that their prayer technology is working.
Is working.
And
yes.
that is why they're propounding it, basically. They're propagating that.
Yes, but they have accepted the criteria to be applied, which is, does it work? And I think it does. Some friends of mine have told me that a kind of calmness emerges under conditions of certain prayers, and then there is a physical comfort in their state of illness, a physical comfort which comes through this. And if it does, then I accept it.
In a sense, it speeds up the processes of the body to
That's
heal
right.
itself.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so it could be a valid technology.
That's right.
Mhm.
But we should be clear about what it is.
So in your definition of these quadrant, in a sense, and I don't like to call them quadrants because what you described was, I mean, the classic vision of a quadrant is you have a square, you divide it into
That's
four
right,
quarters.
yes.
But what you describe is that there is more merging into
There are,
technology than
yes.
there is in other areas. And
Yes.
so it won't really be a quadrant. It would be an odd shape.
I think it would be, yes, there you are right, yes.
Now there's a lot more into what you're saying. When you describe that the scientist comes and says, if God created the sun on the third day, how could you have day one and day two? Isn't that exactly the same question as if Big Bang was the beginning of creation, what happened before the Big
Before
Bang?
that, yes, yes. Well, it is that kind, although in the case of the sun, you have no definition for a day to be applied to day one or two. Before the Big Bang, that is a question which the Big Bang theory forbids you from asking. This is the beginning. But you say, where did the beginning come from? Then it's no longer the beginning. There are people who have gone into that question. My friend Tryon has said that this is a quantum fluctuation in the vacuum which failed to collapse back into the vacuum and expanded out and became the universe.
An accident.
It is pure and simple. Now, you ask why this happened. All he does is, he tells you here is the vacuum, and the probability of this is higher than zero. Not high, but there is a positive probability.
And therefore it
And
happens.
It happened. I've heard him give that talk, and I've seen people sit there and squirm. But he says, look, I'm offering you a view, now you do whatever you want with it.
It's not really an explanation, though,
No,
right? It's
no.
just another belief.
It's a possibility, given the whole body of scientific knowledge we have. From that, this can be stated as a possibility. That's all.
So because of what we know, we can simply say it happened.
That's right. And it was not impossible. And therefore it happened, connected with the theory. But clearly,
It leaves a lot to be desired.
Right. The level of satisfaction is low.
And that comes from the domain of religion, or its lack in the domain of religion.
Partly that, and partly, well, you could absorb it into religion. Now, with respect to religious belief, we do not claim for religion literal truth. I think probably the very ancient people did believe that there was some spirit, there was the queen of the animals, and there was the goddess of the river and so on. But I think from maybe the second millennium on, people didn't take this quite literally.
Second millennium BC?
BC, yes. What they said was, I don't think they said anything. We as analysts of their state of consciousness would say, they were prepared to look at the world this way. Zarathustra says, this is what I ask you to, the way to look at the world. Look at the world as a moral conflict, as an ideal, a perfect something which became flawed, and you see conflict all around you. Are you prepared to look at it that way? And certainly it's very easy to look at human life, social existence that way. And I have made my commitment. It took me some years to become clear about it. But I do view this, and I do view that it is possible to minimize it, and it is conceivable that we can have a fully harmonious society. This is what I presented at the World Parliament of Religions in 1993, I think. And there was a Parsi gentleman who wrote a paper attacking me, saying that he doesn't know what he's talking about. There are people who are miserable, there are people who are this. Where is the perfect world? I was not saying the world was perfect. I was saying the world is perfectible. If anything, it is not. And that's what we have to recognize.
So by recognizing these domains, we can actually work towards perfecting this perfectible world.
That's if you take this religious view. If on the other hand you take the Christian view, that we are imperfect because of original sin, that contamination has entered our nature, there is nothing we can do about it. We can only transform ourselves to accept that we, sinners, are children of God, and that God loves us and is prepared to forgive us. And in this we become each other's brothers.
And only by grace of God we will be forgiven.
That's right. That the forgiveness will come not through any effort of yours, but only by the grace of God. Now, I know people who have accepted this view. And I knew a very, very first-rate thinker. And he said, "You really believe that?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "You think that all of us, we're sitting, 3 or 4 of us sitting around the table, that we are all sinners?" And he said, "Of course you are." And he was not passing a judgment on us.
It was a statement of fact.
This was for him the perspective. That's how he took the world.
You cannot be here unless you are a sinner.
That's right.
Otherwise you would be in heaven.
That's what you, exactly. And so, and I must say I greatly respected the way he lived and his way of life, which was essentially one of universal consideration. He was a very kind-hearted man and a very pleasant person. This was his way of life. It was his religious way of life. It made sense to him.
He sought his significance in
the fact that he treated each person as an object of respect and love.
So his significance was he was an instrument of bringing the divine love into this world.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit more about this religious domain, or the domain of religion, which you started by saying that one of the demands that we have in life is the demand to seek significance.
Right.
Why?
That I don't know. I'm postulating these as aspects of human nature.
So it is our nature, in our nature.
In our nature to do this.
We want to believe we are important.
That we have some significance for being here.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Otherwise, no, there is a feeling of emptiness.
And that is why the universe that just happened leaves us empty.
That's right. It leaves us with this kind of queasiness. I do think that this is universal, but I have met people who have made no such, who have articulated no such claim. I had a student said, no, I feel nothing. And I said, well, you do raise the question, why? No, I happen to be here. I just don't care. That is a truly non-religious person, not irreligious, non-religious. The religious system hasn't functioned in him. And there are people who are totally unscientific. They do not need to know the explanation of anything. My mother had an aunt who never cared about why anything happened anywhere. And I used to tell her that we do this and, oh, there must be something, there must be something. She was free of science.
But not free of technology.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that she had thought, but she was, I suppose, was concerned with this or that technology. I think to be free of technology is just about impossible. And similarly, I think technology and ethics are so grounded into our simplest consciousness that we cannot escape them.
But we come across so many people, especially nowadays, who seem to be totally free of ethics.
I doubt that. I think totally free of the kind of ethics we would like them to have. But I think they do pass judgment upon others. They do pass judgment upon themselves. How would one do? Then the methodology of each discipline would have to be developed. And in ethics we would have to formulate the ultimate values, which for me are self-realization, freedom and justice. And then look at each context that we are in, the community, the level of technology, the level of our human efforts, whether we are in the world of business, in the market, in education and so on, and see what are the norms of behavior which are appropriate. They generally arise through social conditioning of one sort or another. And society crystallizes the norms. And then if we have a political structure that imposes certain norms for certain goals, and that's what you live by. But as times change, we must re-evaluate them. And this is the methodology of ethics.
And reformulate them.
And that's right, that's right. And often there is resistance there. There is resistance to change in every domain, but least in science.
Why is that? Inertia?
There's a kind of mental inertia. In science, the practice of verification cleans out old beliefs. But in others, there is no clear. In technology too, non-efficient methods perish, but sometimes if the non-efficient methods have a heavy rooting in an aspect of society, that social group will maintain it. Not because this is the most efficient methodology, but because it is significant to their livelihood. And so we get these...
so the functionality becomes more important in that case than...
Yes, than the pure efficiency of the method. Yes.
You said when you were talking about everybody has some sense of ethics, you said that everybody judges others and everybody judges themselves. That's quite a claim. And are you also saying that the maxim, thou shalt not judge, cannot work?
Oh, thou shalt not judge in some final sense. Thou shalt not judge that a person is unworthy of being human, unworthy of salvation or something like that. That's what you should judge. But otherwise, one does judge. No matter what, people do judge. Children judge each other from the age of 2 or even before that. My grandnephew and niece, at very, very young ages, they would come and complain to me about what the other person did and want a validation that their judgment was correct. And when I said, well, never mind, so, no, but that's what he did, and so on, then I would have to say, well, I think to this extent you're right. And then she would be satisfied that her judgment was right, and go and tell her brother that our uncle said that you shouldn't have done this, and so on. We live by this. We live by this.
And without that we will not function.
I think we would have a conception of human life so different from what human life is that we wouldn't be able to recognize it.
We wouldn't be able to recognize
I
life.
think so. So these are elemental beliefs belonging to these domains, and my function is to identify them by their goals, by the methodology, by the process of validation, and separate them so that you don't use the methodology of one to judge the methodology of the other. This removes almost all the standard philosophic confusions, not just in the minds of low-level philosophers, but in the minds of lay people who also think.
So if I approach my life thinking, well, in this area religiosity applies more, is more significant than science because it deals with my significance in this life, let's not use the scientific techniques to deal with this. It's important for me to feel that I'm important in this case.
That's right.
And this is my contribution to life and
you have, yes, and whatever commitment comes through the religious belief that you're taking the world, always an articulated religious belief is a combination of two things: a view of the world and a way of life. There is and a religious teacher always does this. He gives us a view of the world, usually as given by the divinity, and says that if that's how you view the world, then take this to be your way of life. And if you do, then you are religiously worthy.
So if the worldview is that you have fallen from paradise and you're a sinner here, then this is the way to live, and then you will...
That's right, which should be, then you are in a state of readiness to
receiving the grace of God.
Yes.
And if your view of the world is that you're co-operators with God to take this perfecting world towards perfection, you're not in a state of readiness for...
That maybe that might be viewed as an act of pride in the other framework. Here you are constantly striving to transform the world and thereby justifying your existence.
That is what my job is on earth.
Yes.
We talked about these 4 domains and how each branch separated in the Middle East and in the West. What about in the East, particularly the Indian subcontinent and China?
In India, it is, I've asked myself this question. I'm not really very familiar with the ancient history, but there was a separation. There was a kind of science that developed, mainly astronomy. And it grew up as a science, but some tinges of religion remained. A full separation was never achieved in India, largely because the religion became philosophized. That is, instead of a divinity, instead of a clear source of authority, it became a universal consciousness. And so it did not impose upon the other disciplines.
So unlike the West, where science became philosophized, in India, religion became philosophized.
Yes, very, very much so, very much so. And therefore, it had to produce a way of life, but it couldn't. So the way of life then was produced from early traditions where the divinities had established a social order. And ethics came to be derived from dharma, dharma meaning the ideal rule of social existence. And that became then rooted in tradition. So Indian ethics shows a polarity. One, a tremendously rigid traditionalist system, the caste system, plus other requirements of living in this and that way. And the other ethic, a kind of detachment from this world and moving towards a universal consciousness where smaller things become unimportant.
So non-life became the way of life.
Yes, yes, yes.
And equanimity,
That's right.
the path to it.
Yes, yes. If you ask for a straightforward Hindu ethics, you can't get it. You always get this highly traditionalist social structure and a highly detached personal.
What that creates is a tremendous mental inertia and resistance to change.
Oh yes. Oh, yeah.
But the Indian civilization has been noted in history. It's been one of the most influential in history, and not just from a religious point.
No, it produced extraordinary thinkers. It produced mathematicians. It produced literary figures, dramatists, and so on.
Can this sort of transformative agents come out of such a rigid...
Well, these were people who worked on their own in a totally detached way. Society produced no great support, except that most of these were highly educated priests whose food and lodging was supported by the temple. So they didn't have to make a living. They dedicated themselves to these things with the idea that any study of any kind about any aspect of nature is an act of worship.
So they actually used the detachment, the methodology of detachment to detach themselves from the very system which was proposing that methodology. And what about China, the Chinese civilization?
I found it very difficult to track it down. I wish I knew, but I don't. I've tried to see how the Chinese developed technology in a very refined way. How that was reconciled to the life of the Tao, which is the way. And the way is not a prescribed way, but to follow the way when you have removed all internal resistance and all internal confusion, then you are in the way. And how this interacted, I would have to look at the literature in a very subtle way, which I haven't done. I haven't actually availed myself of this material. One of these days I shall study it, but I can't give you an answer.
And what about the Aboriginal religions or ways of thinking, especially in North America and
Oh, there you find the constant mixture of religion and technology, and also, I think, of ethics. But I don't think any explicit movement in the direction of science occurred. Here and there, probably the Maya did produce some kind of astronomical science and so on. But again, my study of that is far, far too superficial for me to be able to give an opinion.
And is part of the attraction of those cultures in today's society because of its somewhat detached way of looking at science?
I suppose that is attractive to people. But you see, if you look at a civilization, it is a group of people who have gathered in a certain location. The word civilization comes from civitas, which means city, but not necessarily a city. It's a group located in one place who are in close social interaction, and therefore there is a notion of a social structure which is supported by a resource base, either river civilizations or oasis civilizations or pastoral civilizations, whatever it is. And this is all organized by some kind of belief, partly scientific, partly technological, certain moral rules rooted in the social structure, and a vision, which is their religious vision. And this group then not only lives in this way, but if the beliefs have become really deeply held, then these beliefs get expressed. And they get expressed in art forms. And all civilizations produce art forms, mainly in architecture. Ancient China, ancient India, certainly ancient Egypt, Babylon and Assyria and so on. And ancient Iran was very pastoralist, so it produced minor architecture until it became an imperial power, and then it produced vast architectural monuments. The expression took place in art which was part of their living system. When the system becomes very sophisticated, then you have individualized art, poets or painters or craftsmen who would produce some one piece of something or other. And when you want to see how these domains are interacting, what you would like to see is how the expression of these various beliefs get transmuted and appear in art forms. Sometimes art is detachment, sometimes art is close attachment, and expression, sometimes it's the expression of the human spirit. So there is a great deal more to look at before one can answer the question you're asking me.
So you're describing to me that this innate human need to understand, to comprehend, has led humanity to this place where it has separated, branched off the various aspects of comprehension, developed methodologies for those, and then has ended up in conflict between these branches of comprehension. And now again, that innate need to comprehend is driving those branches to, at least through you, to reconcile those branches and bring them together
I think,
again.
yes, perhaps we can't do much more than reconcile. Construct them and become clear about what they are so that we don't engage in internal or social conflict. And I think that's what's happening, in some cases through art. In some cases, this disparity and the loss of a unitary system is expressed as in modern art, the kind of scattered representation, the kind of loss of object, a loss of purpose. These artists are manifesting social and a deeper discomfort. Which
A
is
spiritual discomfort,
yes,
perhaps?
a spiritual discomfort. And I think we are not at the moment the intellectual products of our thought do not force us into conflict. It is not conflict, it is a kind of separation, a kind of scattering of our intellectual focus.
A path of reductionism.
Yes, that would be the extreme outcome of that.
That I am only focusing on science and nothing
That's
else.
right. But we're looking at the world not through a clear-cut glass, but through pieces of glass, through which we have different foci, different pictures, which cause a certain kind of discomfort. But the moment we understand what the situation is, we can be rendered comfortable. And I think philosophic insight ultimately will do that.
And that understanding is to understand that these are different pieces of glass?
That's right.
Not
These are-
that the world is incomprehensible?
No, no. The world is, well, that's my assumption. We are capable of understanding the world. When, how, to what extent, I don't know. It presents grave difficulties to us. In science, in ethics, can we construct a society in which all the significant values will be maximized? I hope so, but I don't know. Do we have the intelligence to do it? And once we have some grasp, shall we have the will to do it? I don't know.
And that is what wisdom is.
Yes.
And you were, from the things that you were describing about the arts, is it fair to deduce that at any given time the arts is the representation of the state of the mind, the collective mind?
I suppose an expression of the tranquility or distemper of, yes, the social mind.
And this goes for any forms of art, music,
I think so. I think
performing
so.
arts.
And if you do that, then this is a period of acute distemper. I mean, look at the art. Look at our music. I don't know what to say. But I think we are at the moment in a period of serious transition.
From what to what?
From the clarity of the Enlightenment vision, which was that science is going well, we are aware of what we should do morally, reflective religion is reasonable, it becomes what is frequently known as liberal Christianity or liberal Zoroastrianism, always at war with the deeper traditionalists. But that we are moving, reason is advancing, and very shortly greater insights will be available, better organizations will emerge. Very, very strongly, I think there is a general feeling that we are not moving in that direction. That the advancement of science, which is leading to the advancement of technology, is not an altogether happy situation. That the various social structures which we are building for our moral advancement, for our social, for the actualization of our values in the social structure, are not working. And that the religious beliefs which gave us solace are now progressively seen to be merely mythological lenses through which we looked at the world, and now we no longer feel happy through that.
So we started with myth, we started branching off from myth, we are back to myth. And we are not happy with this myth.
No, no.
And that is the cause of this spiritual...
I think so, this spiritual disorientation. And I don't know what we can do about it. Look at this century, 2 world wars, large number of groups of people killing each other. For what? There are some immediate articulations you have, but generally for what? How have we become, after all this realization, so barbaric? And I think this disturbs people, disturbs me. And I think its manifestation is in this scattered form of art, meaningless pictures, which the artist proudly declares as worthy art because it is meaningless.
So because our world is meaningless, our art is also meaningless, and that is the only form of art which is worthy because it reflects our
I
world.
don't know if it's only a form, but that's what I see around.
So the innovations have all been in the arts, have all been towards less and less meaning.
Yes, or the manifestation of our finding less and less meaning.
So art imitates life?
No, it expresses in aesthetic form the inner conditions of our consciousness. Go to a museum of modern art, and you must walk out disappointed. What is this, you ask, or at least I ask, unless you have trained yourself to be a contemporary aesthete and you talk about this thing and that thing and so on, but still emptiness. Listen to a contemporary opera. It's jagged music of discontent and conflict and so on. In the old operas, there were people who died of broken hearts or heaven knows what. But they sang beautiful songs, and you walked out and said, well, I'm sorry that this woman died. She went mad and she died. But what a magnificent performance she gave.
It was a moving tragedy.
That's right.
Not just a tragedy.
Exactly. This is, I think, a manifestation. But now look, I'm talking not at any great depth. I'm now just expressing my surface reactions to the problems of our times. How reliable this is, I don't know. And I wouldn't wish you to take this as a very serious judgment. It is, I've lived a long life, I've thought about this a long time, and this is what emerges at this time.
Is there hope?
Oh yes, I I think so. Look at the tremendous achievement of science, of technology, of our moral refinement, and of our religious vision, which the traditionalists will not permit to be articulated because they want to hold it down to earlier traditions. But once this discomfort is overcome and we are free to exercise our spirit, then we'll reach a pleasanter situation.
And how can we free our spirits? Is it an individual choice?
It is for us to exchange with each other in rational terms and in kinder terms.
And within the domains,
And
within the methodologies of the domains.
And be aware of that, yes, yes. At least that's about as far as an ordinary rational being can go. And that's what I am.
So what I'm hearing really is you're saying be human and there is hope.
Yes, yes.
As simple as that.
Yes, be human without getting yourself committed to some this or that ideology or this or that tradition. Be open, be rational, and accept the humanity of others and be human. It's not difficult, but we have been drilled into all kinds of things from which we must escape.
And this is the purpose of philosophy.
One of the purposes, yes.
To
yes.
tell us to be human.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Professor. On the final day, we discussed the implications of his thesis on various social institutions and communal life. And we had an emotional farewell that seemed to be the appropriate closure. Professor, let me ask you a few questions of a very personal nature. What is that thread that has run through your life?
The seeking and the hoping to formulate with sufficient exactitude the results of this search. I knew that I wasn't going to get a final answer, but I'm happy that I have obtained a certain kind of insight into these and their interrelations, so that at this stage I would say that a significant part of my striving has received appropriate or sufficient satisfaction.
Do you have any regrets in your professional life?
I would have liked, if I had the opportunity to study certain aspects of mathematics at a younger age, which was not available to me when I was a student. And I would have liked, if I had the opportunity, to study the functioning of the brain, which I think gives us insight into a great deal of human existence, and which I've been reading on the side, but reading on the side doesn't get you there. You have to know the anatomy and physiology. So these are two things I would have, if I had all the insights and all the opportunities, which I didn't have, I would have liked to do.
And are there any regrets in your personal life?
No. No, I'm fully content there.
There's nothing you would have done differently?
No.
Which aspect of your life are you most pleased with?
I think the fact that my struggling for philosophic insights bore fruit, and I could integrate my vision of Kantian philosophy with philosophic analysis and with the philosophy of human nature and civilization, with these articulation and interrelation of domains of belief, which enable me to interpret a great of human life and its intellectual history. I used to read these things, and I read an enormous amount. And it was all scattered, and I tried to relate this with that and so on. I have a sheaf of papers which I made various attempts, which is all useless now. But I think in the last 4 or 5 years, I've had the satisfaction of gaining an insight, clearly telling me this is what I was looking for, and I've found, and I can apply it. It's by no means a final answer. But it is something that has made me quite satisfied.
Professor, how would you like to be remembered?
As a good man, a thoughtful man, one who was not reluctant to serve his fellow human beings as in the area in which he could contribute, to reflect, to expound the teachings which I have received and which I have thought about. And if in doing this I have made people happy, let them remember that I did make them feel happy.
A true member of the human race.
I hope so. I hope so. Because humanity is something institutionally dear to me.
Professor Kaykhosro Irani, a true human being. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.